Hi, welcome. Today we've got Eric Reardon, new pitching coach there for the Seahawks at Wagner College, a D1 program in the Northeast Conference. Appreciate you joining us today, Eric.
Yeah, Marty, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the program there at Wagner.
I think let's go campus wise first. So it's pretty cool. Being a Jersey guy myself, I think people have a certain impression of Staten Island as a location. Really just a big hill. So we're fortunate here on campus that we get the best of both worlds. Up at the top of the hill where campus is, it feels like you're on a farm. Like not in the city like people think of it. We got wild turkeys and wild deer running around, really quiet up here. And then, you take the drive 5 minutes down to the bottom of the hill and you get the action that you're looking for with the restaurants and the life and, stuff like that. Plenty to do. So the separation from the hill that campus is on down the bottom of Staten Island where you get the action and then you're a 10-minute, train ride into the Big Apple. We get the best of both worlds here. I think program wise, we lose in the conference championship game last year, so we're one win away from a regional, and that's the task that we've been challenged with here is we got to collect a team and get these guys prepared to get over that hump and into the national tournament.
Sure. You guys have like a theme each year?
So one big thing that we always focus on, it's on the back of all our guys' practice shirts. It's DYJ for do your job. So something that we focus on in that regard is just like the difference between metrics and execution, right? So like our job as a coaching staff is to prepare these guys to win baseball games. So especially as it pertains to the high school recruiting process, these days with the PBRs and the perfect games, I think the exposure that those high school guys can get from those services is amazing. It certainly makes our life easier as coaches in a regard where we can just throw your name in Google and all of your stuff is on those platforms. But when you get out of that self-centric atmosphere and environment as you're going through the recruiting process into now we're on a team and our purpose has to be, let's take those metrics and figure out how to execute on them and develop wins out of them instead of just throwing the ball really hard or hitting the ball really far. That's kind of our mantra, where we want to take guys who are really talented on the metrics end and figure out the right formula to develop that into a winning culture.
Sure. So how did you get there? Tell me a little bit about your playing days and your coaching background.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I'm a Jersey guy. So I grew up right in the middle of New Jersey. I went to North Brunswick Township High School, about 10 minutes from Rutgers. So I was fortunate enough as a high school player. I was the conference player of the year in my high school conference in 2015. Got a scholarship to go play baseball at Rutgers in the Big Ten. So I got to stay close to home, which was awesome to me, being able to see my family and have them at the games all the time. So yeah, I played in the Big Ten for 5 years through COVID. Three different coaching staffs, two different head coaches while I was there. Super fortunate. I had nothing but great things to say about everybody I got to play for and play with while I was on campus there in New Brunswick. And right when I finished up, right when I graduated in 2021, I jumped on the staff with Connor Kortmann at Rutgers-Newark. It was just an amazing experience to be able to hop right into the coaching game, get my master's degree while I was there. And then lucky enough, while I was working for Rutgers-Newark, to come and recruit at some of Coach Noto's camps here at Wagner. So him and I were able to develop a relationship. His pitching coach job opened up. Again, super fortunate that, he was looking at me, and we end up in this situation now where I get to be up here in Staten Island coaching the Seahawks.
Awesome. So with post COVID now, we've got 40-man rosters. Can you talk a little bit about how many pitchers you guys have on your roster as part of that 40-man?
Yeah, I mean, give or take, plus or minus one or two, we're going to sit right around 20 guys. I think that number usually jumps off the page at some people, especially the positional guys, saying, well, half the roster is arms. But the bottom line to me is just the amount of innings that we have to pitch. So in a 55 game regular season, before we even talk about conference tournament, NCAA tournament, that's almost, getting up close to 600 innings that we have to throw over the course of the year. So you need the arms, and you need guys that can be super effective to fill those innings. So the pitching staff's going to sit right around 20. How that breaks down from different roles is usually what we're tasked with figuring out how it shakes down. But yeah, as a overarching rule, like somewhere between 18 to 21 guys.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you're right. Some parents might say, "Well, my gosh, how am I ever going to get any time on the mound if you've got that many pitchers?" They're used to travel teams and like smaller rosters. But can you talk a little bit about your schedule? Like what happens like in a regular conference week? Like you got weekend games, you got weekday games, how that all works?
Yeah. So, I mean, a conference schedule will travel Thursday if it's an away game. We'll practice Thursday night, and then we have to play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So a guy's going to start Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, different guy each day. And then depending upon how the game goes, like we know with baseball, you use a certain amount of bullpen arms, and then you probably have somebody in that closer role that is going to pitch the back end. And then from there, we turn around, we travel back Sunday night, we get home early Monday morning. Tuesday and or Wednesday, we're going to play midweek games before turning it around and doing it all over again the next Thursday. So over the course of the week, you're going to have 4 or 5 games that you have to manage, so that, anywhere between 36 and 45 innings that you have to pitch. So as much as it's easy to feel like looking at it surface level, you might get bogged down and push, how are there enough innings for all these guys to go around? When you look at it at a weekly basis and you mix in like recovery time and build up and prep, there's certainly opportunities for guys to get innings.
Sure. What about your freshman class? What's a typical freshman class overall? And then how many arms are you looking to get? And what determines that number?
What determines that number is going to be largely based on like the graduating class or guys that have moved on. I know for us, like as far as I've seen, a recruiting class has never been bigger than, let's say, 12 guys. And roughly speaking, like right around half of those will be pitchers, just because guys need to fill those innings. You need guys that can pitch the baseball. So, I think as a general rule, like 5, 6 arms in a recruiting class, and like the size of it will never be more than around 12. I think our purpose behind that is, we've all heard, or at least I'll speak for myself, like stories of teams that'll bring in 60, 70 guys for the first day of the fall and are looking to whittle it away. Like our culture is so centered around building a family environment. So we want to make sure that the guys we're bringing in like have the right makeup. They're the right type of personality for our program and for the culture that we're trying to maintain. So we keep it selective to a degree. And then on that front, like you don't, as crude as it might sound, you don't get to just be a good guy and play high level baseball. You got to be a good guy that can get your job done, whether it's on the pitcher's mound, in the field, in the batter's box. So our job is to find the right guy that fits our program, and then hopefully develop such a relationship with him from the recruiting process through his time here in Staten Island that, he's super excited to be part of the Wagner culture, the Wagner baseball program, and he can continue to push this message on down the line as we go year to year.
How has the transfer portal either helped or hurt you guys? And how's that kind of changed the way you're looking at recruiting now, as opposed to, hey, that freshman class being, or that incoming class being typically mostly freshmen? Now it seems like, hey, we've got a lot of transfer guys, a lot of JUCO guys. How's that transfer portal impacted you guys?
Our thing is just so centered around giving the guys such a good experience that if they're super successful, they want to stay as part of our program. Now, that's not to say with the NIL portion of the reality of the world we live in these days, like if a team's going to pay you $250,000 to go play for their program, our intention is not to take money out of your pocket. But that's getting a little abstract. I think the answer is the transfer portal is super valuable. It can also be super detrimental if you don't understand how to balance it. So our perspective really is, if we're recruiting a class of 12 guys, we're going to recruit the 12 guys we think are the best fit for our program. So the breakdown of who we pull out of the portal and who we recruit from high school is not a set number. I think there's a lot of value in guys that already have college experience and are going maybe D1 to D1, D3 to D1, JUCO transfer guys. But I also think there's plenty of talented guys in high school too. So if you're in that 12 best guys that fit our culture the right way, and we think you can succeed in our program. It doesn't matter if those 12 guys pull from high school or it's 12 guys out of the portal or some number in between that spectrum. It's just a matter of, can we find the right fit for those guys for our program?
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about scholarships and how a lot of parents think, hey, I'm going to go get a full scholarship. My kids, we've put all this time, we're traveling around the world, and all the money that goes into travel baseball. Scholarships, it's a percentage, it's an equivalency sport. Can you talk about the reality of scholarships and how that impacts putting this now 40 men on the team?
Yeah, so my answer to this question is always the value of academics. So, like, if you go look online, it's not super cheap to go to Wagner year to year. But the bottom line is, like, our academic department does such a great job where, like, our academics are super strong here and they understand the value in not pulling money out of people's pockets. I think the main concern is that if we bring a guy in and he really wants to come to our program, but there's a big concern about, can I afford it or can my family afford it? Then that's not necessarily something you want to be concerned with while you're trying to enjoy your college experience. So, my answer to that question is, first off, like, grades are a super important metric just as much as your velo on the mound or your exit velo might be, because you can make some money back year over year with an academic package that you might be able to receive if you're a strong high school student. Now, from a more baseball perspective, like 11.7 scholarships to disperse among 40 guys is a difficult number. But at the end of the day, if the grades match up and we can give you a little something or athletically, excuse me, where we can make it affordable for your family, like that's where things get easier operationally. So, like, being a good student is something that's super valuable to us as a program, because we want to bring in the best guys who we know aren't going to be concerned about the the cost year to year, simply because they have an academic package, which means they know they're going to do really strong in the classroom. And then they have those two boxes checked. They can worry about playing ball and getting better on the field once we get them. So that's a more generalized answer. Like, speaking numbers wise, it's not a ton of, we're not on 85 scholarships like a fully funded Division I football team might be, but when you combine the academic packages with the athletic money, there's usually a good formula there where we can find guys that are the right fit and can succeed and be in a good place financially by the time they get here and get to play ball.
So and the reality is, if you got a 40-man roster, I think right now it's what, 32 counters, which means only 32 of those 40 guys can actually even receive a partial scholarship, right? So you've got 8 guys that are walk-ons, and talk a little bit about that walk-on role and how important that is. If you're going to go postseason, you're going to have some of those walk-on guys play some big roles.
Absolutely. I think, you hear all these stories like a Ben Zobrist guy or like a Jose Altuve guy, where it's just like they're trying to get rid of them, and they keep showing up because they love the game and they know that they're good at it. Like, there's something super valuable in having that belief in yourself. And the reality of the situation is, like, guys that really want to be a part of our program, like, that shows us something. And, like, that's exciting to us. But by the same measure, like, if you're a high academic guy and you can get a ton of money that way, and we're walk on in the sense of a baseball scholarship, then you might still be a super talented player, but it can work out financially different for you than it does for another guy. The bottom line is, like, guys that are talented enough to make it at this level, that the numbers don't line up from a counter standpoint of that 32 out of 40, like, if you're good enough and you're talented enough and you're motivated and driven enough, the opportunity is there for you. And then your ability to take advantage of that opportunity speaks a lot to your character. Now, that's certainly not to say anything about guys that receive athletic money. But the bottom line is, like, that bet on yourself mentality. And, how many times have we heard the stories of the guys that started out as a walk-on and ended up as big leaguers? So, especially in the world today with all the connectivity and the transparency that goes on and everybody's knowledge of the finances and things, I certainly hope, because the value is, priceless, that guys still have a little bit of that bet on themselves mentality when it comes to walking onto a program.
Well, because when you show up in the fall, it doesn't matter whether you're a walk-on guy, big scholarship guy. Guys show up in the fall. You guys have to win games, right? If you don't win games, you're looking elsewhere. So uh, it's a competition, and whoever's going to make help you win is going to be on the field.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's similar to what I was saying in reference to the high school recruiting versus the transfer portal recruiting. Like if the 9 best guys are all walk-on guys, then those are the 9 best guys that are going to play. You know, whatever combination of those guys gives us the best shot to get a W at the end of the game, that's the lineup that's going to go out on the field. So the standing, just as you said, like there's not really a different standing when it comes. You know, we're not going back and checking this guy's going to get in the lineup because he's got this much money. It's a matter of, like you said, once you get up here and you're in the locker room and you're on the field, if you give us the best shot to win, you're the guy that's going to play.
How do you guys use JUCO recruiting? Can you talk a little bit about is that, do you look at that similar to like portal guys, or is that like a different niche?
It's very similar. I think in terms of JUCO, maybe you're a late bloomer guy. So I know, especially with these new communication rules with who we can talk to and when we can talk to them coming out of high school, there's some guys that might miss the curve when they're a junior or senior in high school just because of later communication and earlier recruiting. That's the bottom line. So if you're a guy that might have made a jump when you were 18 going into 19 years old instead of 16 going into 17 years old, then that JUCO route is super valuable for us because we get a chance to see you. And I think an interesting point in that regard is we get to play a couple of fall games, and we'll always schedule at least one against the local JUCO that has some guys in that category where, you know, they've had to get their grades right coming out of high school. Maybe they're a late bloomer athletically, but we're able to go out there and compete against them, see them live, and kind of track their process further outside of the high school game.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of parents understand that a lot, other than like the the typical collegiate summer leagues, a lot of that JUCO recruiting happens during that fall. There's a lot of junior college tournaments, and teams are playing junior colleges and get a chance to see guys. So there's a lot of looks at those JUCO guys in the fall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it just gives us another opportunity to see you live. That's something that we put a ton of emphasis on, even from our prospect camps, having high school guys come up so we can get a look as a full staff, seeing them live, being able to play those games against JUCOs in the fall is another opportunity for us to see them compete live as a full staff and kind of go over our notes and have some conversation about the things that we saw. So yeah, having those fall games is really valuable for us.
So take us kind of behind the scenes of the discussions. You just went through a summer, you're getting ready to get back on campus. When you guys finished up, had your closeout meetings, and started thinking about, hey, we're going to recruit this summer. Can you walk us through kind of that conversation as to, are you looking for a certain number of guys? You're spreading certain numbers of scholarships. Talk about how you organize and head into the summer.
Yeah, so from a scholarship perspective, and from a roster perspective, it's very similar. Like we know these guys are graduating or moving on. We understand what positions they played at the same time. So there's money scholarship wise that's being vacated. There's also roster spots and positions that are being vacated. You also have to project out a little bit. So like we're recruiting the 2024 class this summer up until August 1st when the 2025s jumped in. So you're kind of projecting out saying like, okay, after this upcoming season, we'll have these gaps open as well. So hopefully it's like a trickle down effect where like the guys we have coming in as freshmen this year filled in the gaps we had the previous year. Now we have to extrapolate an extra year out and say, okay, after the 2024 season, we'll have these spots open on the roster. We'll have this money available. That's something that coaches always told me when I was going through the recruiting process was take a look at the roster of these schools you might be interested in and see like which guys are going to be seniors the year you're a senior in high school. And you can kind of line up, like I played first base and I pitched in high school. So that was always, you know, what I would look at. I'd go on and say, okay, I'm a junior in high school now, they're first baseman and their 2 weekend starters are juniors in college right now, which means they're going to have a need at that position once I get up there on campus. So that's really how it is for us. I mean, behind the scenes, it's just making sure we're on the right page and we have the right names and the right years. But outside of the same advice I still got in high school, it's not much different.
So walk me through. You're gonna go. You got a name of a kid. You've checked him out on PBR. You're gonna go see him live. He's playing in a tournament. Kind of walk me through that process. He's got a 2 o'clock game in a tournament at some facility. Kind of walk me through your process. You show up. What happens after that? As you're gonna go watch this pitcher?
Yeah. So if he's an arm, let's say he's one of those guys that's old enough we can talk with him. It's going to be, hey, like saw your pitching today, or saw your team has a game today at 2 p.m. at Diamond Nation. Are you throwing? He'll say yes. All right, great. I'll be there. Sometimes I might not tell him I'll be there just so he doesn't think about it. But yeah, break out the radar gun, see him from both sides of the field, check out his mechanics that way, make sure the velo and the movements check out. Usually there's conversation with his travel coach, kind of try to get an understanding about his thoughts. Obviously, I'm coming to see him for the first time. The travel coach is with him probably for years now. Get an understanding of the kid's background, as much personal information as you can get, like family setup. What kind of worker is he? Does he come in for the lifts in the weight room in the winter time? Like, what kind of worker is he? Does he play other sports? I'll bring what I saw back to the rest of our coaching staff, and Coach Noto here will go over the notes. And then from there, our process is really invite them to camp so that our whole staff can see them. The reality of the situation is I'll go out on the road and see a bunch of guys at certain events, and our other assistants that get to recruit are out on the road at other events. And we try to have that convergence at our prospect camp. So for us, process wise, it's go identify and get, a understanding of the makeup and the background of a kid at a game, maybe follow up with him a couple more times throughout the summer, try to get him to our camp so that way he can see our campus, see our facilities, get to play on our field at our home stadium. That way at camp, the whole staff gets a chance to see him. Plus, if that kid's making the effort to come to camp, we know he has some interest in us, which is huge too. And then from there, we start getting serious about pushing things forward from a offer, roster spot, athletic scholarship type of deal.
So when you show up, you flying the W, you got all the gear on, sometimes incognito, you got the hat pulled down, hiding behind a tree. What techniques are you using there?
No, I typically, like, the look gives you away, right? You come to the game with your backpack on and you throw the radar gun up with your notes in the back pocket. It doesn't matter if I'm wearing, a Halloween costume. It's going to be easy to pick out what's going on. So yeah, most of the time I'm dressed exactly as I am now. I got the colors on, and I want to make sure that if it gets to the point where I'm going to go have a conversation with that travel coach, he knows who I am and he can see where I'm coming from. And there's a lot of insight that can be gathered that way too. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, this kid's going to have to pitch for our program. So like, if he's going to wear these colors and I'm going to be behind the backstop evaluating him at a practice or in an inner squad or during a game, I want him to be familiar with who I am. And I think just basing this off of my experience going through the recruiting process, there was something exciting about, like, hey, the Wagner
coach. It is. The guy shows up, you get a little sweaty in the hands, like, okay, today's the day. He's here. Everybody's talking about it, all the teammates. Exactly. And yeah.
So, and I think there's two sides to that, right? Like, the kids can get super excited because it should be cool. I know these days the recruiting process can be really tedious and cumbersome, but it should be exciting that the kid knows he has an opportunity here. And that added little bit of pressure with the sweaty palms that you're talking about. How does he respond to that, knowing that I'm in the building or I'm at the field watching him?
So let's talk a little bit about the underclassmen. With the rules now, August 1st, you can't really communicate recruiting information or interest, and that can make offers, that kind of stuff. But you guys are still following those underclassmen, going to see them play. What should those guys be doing to, like, show interest or let you know, hey, when August 1st comes around, I'm really interested in Wagner. What are your recommendations for those underclassmen?
I think emails are huge and Twitter is huge. So the first thing I wish everybody knew is that, like, your messages don't fall on deaf ears if you're an underclass guy. Like, the stuff that you'll email us, the stuff you post on Twitter, maybe you send it in a DM, like, just because we can't respond doesn't mean we don't see it, right? So the first step in that process was the identification piece. So we might go out to a game and say, man, this kid's legit, but he's a 2026 and we can't talk to him yet. And that's okay. Like, we're all going to follow the rules. Don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to self promote. And by the same measure, like, just stay at it, man. If you keep blasting me emails, I know that you're interested in my school. And when that August 1st date hits for you next year, we can have a conversation. Just until then, outside of receiving and going to watch you play, there's not much I can do, because we gotta stay inside the lines. So I think the only kind of trepidation I've seen from some young guys is you'll see a super active Twitter profile for like a month at the beginning of the summer, and then it trails off because they're not hearing anything back. It's not because you're bad, it's because everybody's got to follow the rules that they have to follow. So I think being able to promote yourself on social media, being able to send emails even without a response is valuable. And then if there's schools you're interested in as a young guy, there's a ton of value in going to the prospect camps. So maybe isolate a couple of schools that you have a ton of interest in, find their prospect camps, and if it works for you from an affordability standpoint, then that's something that can be really valuable for you as well.
Yeah, so that's great advice, because like as a freshman, sophomore, that's really the only time you're going to get on campus or you're going to have any interaction with the coaches is at those camps. So yeah, that's really good advice. And I can tell you, like personally, like in the past, I have not told guys, there's a lot of camps that colleges have, and I've been kind of like, well, listen, there's gonna be 10,000 kids show up there. I'm not sure that's your greatest, that's not the best camp necessarily. Now I've kind of changed the tune of like, listen, man, as a freshman, sophomore, that's your only avenue of interaction. So, like you said, and you only have so many weekends. So if a kid's showing up at your camp, that there's some interest there, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially considering just like the amount of games that get played in travel ball these days. So like if you're making the effort as one of those underclass guys, or even an upper class guy, to come to camp and maybe like take a Wednesday, coming off of a 5-game weekend, going into another 5-game weekend, you come midweek to our camp, that shows a ton to us about your interest in the program.
So let's talk a little bit about that communication. You mentioned like being active on Twitter. What are some of the things that you like to see from guys? Because some guys, like, they'll just post like when they do games. Do you like to see other stuff like workouts? What are some of the things that maybe have caught your eye or impressed you that guys are posting out there? Because I get that question a lot. Hey, what should I be posting? I don't want to, make it seems like it's all about me when I'm posting this stuff, but I keep telling, hey, like they want to see it. So what are some things you like?
Yeah, I think like there's never too much, especially if you're a hitter. Like, game action is really good. If you have video of you in the weight room, like, that's great. Maybe like post some like PR stuff if you hit a new number or something. Like, as a pitcher, the big thing for me is the amount of guys that tell me their velo and then we go look up their metrics and it's something else. So I'm not here to call anybody a liar, but like, if you're telling me you hit 88 at this tournament, like, there's got to be some way for you to get that radar gun in the video. I think from a pitching perspective, if you're going to post a video on Twitter, have the Rapsodo metrics, have the radar gun in there where we can verify, like, hey coach, I sat 85 to 87 this week. That's awesome. Show me. Like, that's the big
The golden
advice.
ticket.
Yeah.
Sure. So you mentioned the progression, right? Guys, you're showing up, you're going to see a kid, they could maybe come to a camp. When it comes to campus visits, how do you guys do campus visits? Are they always singles? Do you bring a bunch of guys in? Do you have junior days?
A vast majority of the time, it's just single visits. We like to encourage the guys to bring their families with them and spend some time with them, because there's so much of this is so non-personal, where it's, I come to watch your game. I'm not able to talk to you at the event, and then we're communicating electronically if you're old enough, and then you come to campus for the visit. Like, we take a lot of time talking about and developing our culture. So we want to make sure you have an understanding of the kind of guys we are when you're on campus. And I think the value that we try to provide is we'll take as much time as we need, as much time as you like, to show you as much as we can around campus. We have a presentation that we have set up for the guys. It's very similar to our introduction, like our first team meeting in the fall, that we'll go through with guys that come up on campus for a visit, and just kind of give them the lowdown on like the type of operation we're running here, behind the scenes of the baseball. I think from a practice standpoint, from an execution standpoint, it's all going to look very similar. Like, you've been playing the same game on the field your entire life. So the game of baseball is not going to change much once you get here. It's going to be a lot of information about the type of culture we have, what you're going to eat, what's your meal plan going to be, where you're going to live, how you're going to get around, like that more day-to-day stuff. And then making sure you and your family have an understanding of the type of people we are. That's kind of our focus when we get guys up here for visits.
You guys do a lot of overnights, or is it normally just, hey, show up at 8, we do the tour? Can you kind of walk through a little bit like the agenda?
Yeah, no, we'll just make it a day trip. So the way it'll go most of the time, we'll meet up with the athlete and their family in the office. We'll go upstairs here. We'll take them through the athletic center, make sure they see everything. They get the weight room, they get the locker room, they get the swimming pool, they get the
The sweet
basketball.
locker room, as you can see in the back. Nice. Well
Oh
done.
yeah. Yeah, we just had this redone last year. It was the first time it opened up brand new. So we're super excited to have this
Yes.
new locker room set up. So yeah, I mean, we take them in here. It's awesome in here. Guys, they get big eyed about it. And then we'll show them the basketball court. We'll have some practices. We have drop down cages in there. We have a portable plyo wall and some bullpen mounds that we can throw down and get some good work in when it's cold or it's snowing up here. Show them the athletic center, the weight room, like I said before, get that. And then we'll go out, we'll show them some classrooms, we'll take them to the library, we show them the dining hall, we walk them through the dorms, show them that setup. Just make sure we touch all the parts of campus so that they have an idea of, like, if you're coming from class, going back to your dorm, and then you're coming to practice, and then you got to go eat, you kind of get the lay of the land about what things are going to look like. We'll bring them back into the locker room. We got a huge TV over there on the wall. We'll set up that presentation and kind of run them through the stuff that we're about. After walking around outside in the summer heat all day, we get back in the AC and kind of get to have some conversation a little more one-on-one, a little more personally than you can while you're walking around giving the informational tour.
So talk about that. So you get to the end, and normally that's when we're sitting down with the coach. That's when you normally get like that real talk, right? Hey, this is where we see you guys at. Sometimes it's an offer, maybe sometimes it's, hey, we see you as one of our final guys. And talk about that conversation, because I have found in the past that's really where the rubber meets the road in that conversation. You get a real, you're sending tweets back and forth, or DMs and some emails, but that's really where I think a lot of honesty like shows up in that process.
Yeah, so the best advice I can give is understand, as a recruit, no matter what level you're coming from, like, I hope that we can understand that, like, the definition and the separation between the recruiting process and the decision making. I think there's a number of guys who spend so much time in the recruiting process that it's like, I want this offer and that offer and the other offer. And at the end of the day, the recruiting process has to end at some point if you want to be a college baseball player. So my best advice would be, like, find yourself in a position where you're ready to make a decision. Find yourself in a position where you can have that conversation with your parents privately, maybe on the way home or overnight, or sleep on it. And the bottom line is, like, if we want you as part of our program, the objective is not to put pressure on you, but we have to, if we're offering you a scholarship, we're not going to go offer that same scholarship to the next guy if we're still waiting on your answer. So if you want to be a part of our program, that's great. We have you up for the visit. You should be in a position where it can be like, okay, yes or no. And I think a lot of especially the younger guys in high school, are afraid to say no. If you come for the visit and you say, listen, it's not the right fit for me, there can be all the respect in the world for that. You got to spend a ton of time on campus with this staff at this place for 4 years. But it's difficult when we get to that late stage in the game to give you the freedom to kind of sit on that for a long period of time and say, hey, we're strapped in with such and such a dollar amount in the recruiting process because we haven't heard back from this guy yet.
That's the dance, right? So one of the things that I really recommend for players is to communicate with the coaches up front. Hey, what's my timeline? So like you guys have your recruiting timeline, right? You like to we like to have offers out, we like to have commitments lined up so we can sign guys and then get NLI signed, right? So you guys have a time frame. For the players, they should also be thinking about, hey, am I ready to sign now? Do I want to wait? I'm going to wait till the end of the summer, coach. That's when I'm going to make several visits. I'm going to wait till the end of the summer, and that's when I'm going. If guys are talking to you and communicating to you, I think that looks like, hey, I'm an adult. I know what my time frame is. Does that seem reasonable on your end? If they're talking about, hey, this is my schedule of when I think I want to do this.
100%. And I think from our perspective, like we want to give offers to guys that want to be here. So like I've had a conversation before, I've had plenty of conversations before where it's like I'll be on the phone with the kid and say, "Hey, we like you. What's your timeline looking like? When are you looking to make a decision?" And then as you said, I'm, right before school starts, that's when I'm looking to make my decision. I don't want to be in a hurry, but I want to start the school year knowing where I'm going. That sounds great. Our process moves a little bit quicker. It's July 4th. I'm not looking to push you on anything, but hey, if stuff starts to speed up for you, make sure you let me know and keep me in the loop so that way we can push things along for you if those dates change. So
Yeah,
I think that open line of communication is really where things become valuable.
yeah, 100%. Because like if a kid's thinking, hey, if they're just trying to stack up offers, like you were saying, I tell parents all the time, they come back in, hey man, this coach got an offer from wherever. And I said, well, what's the time frame? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, those guys they got money tied up. They're trying to make a decision. They may not have told you, but there's a time limit on that offer. So you need to ask them, hey, do I have a couple weeks? If you're late in the process, do I have a month? Do I have the summer? So where it gets lost, I think, like you mentioned, is in the communication. You don't say it, right? So ask the questions and make sure that from the coach, hey, when are you expecting me to decide?
Right. And I think that works both ways. Like from a morality standpoint, like we don't want to give a kid an offer and then wait on them and then offer it to somebody else. And then the kid comes back a month later and says, "Hey, I'm in." And now we're really in a bind. So from a morality standpoint, like it's not about pushing you and rushing you towards a decision. It's just a matter of making sure we have our ducks in a row financially, roster spot wise, whatever the criteria might be. And then if you're that kid that might need a little more time, like if you want to be a part of our program and we like you as a recruit, like we want to make sure that stuff lines up too. So like us getting on the same page is usually just a matter of asking the right questions and being clear with each other. And I think there's a lot of trepidation about saying no or putting pressure on a guy in either direction. And I like that hurdle can be overcome super easily with just some questions being asked and some clear communication.
Because you guys have that conversation a lot more than that player is going to have it. And with the number of players you're recruiting and you bring in a class of 9 to 12, there's all sorts of no's, right? That's part of your daily process. So they don't have to fear saying, hey, this is not the right fit for me.
Right, 100%. And the bottom line is like I'm sure everybody's heard a number of coaches say this throughout the process or just being on social media. Like we want guys who want to be here. So even if it gets so far along where you're interested and then you take the tour around campus and it's not for you, like it makes everybody's life a little bit easier if you're like, hey, this ain't the right fit for me. Now, ideally, when we get guys around us and we take them around campus, like if we like you enough to get you up here, we want a yes out of you. But it's just man to man, guy to guy. It's there's something respectable about being able to say, listen, this ain't for me, rather than trying to drag it out and just kind of fade into the distance.
So let's talk a little bit about like the actual recruiting stuff. As you guys are looking for pitchers, You guys looking for specific body types, maybe for different roles? Is there a look you're looking for?
Not necessarily. It comes down a lot more to ability. Usually the bigger guys that have a strong frame are the ones that are durable for 5 innings on the weekend. But at the end of the day, like if we go watch you pitch and we're as thorough as we need to be, you might be a guy that doesn't necessarily fit that mold stature wise, but we've seen that you have the ability to do that. I think in that regard, it's a lot less about body type and a lot more about pitchability. Like one of the things we focus on is maintaining velo. So like if you're a guy that's starting for your high school program and you go out there at the travel game every weekend and you throw 5 innings and you're 88 in the first and you're 87 in the fifth, you're a guy that we know has that in him. If you're a guy that comes out and you're a fireballer and you're low 90s for 1 inning and then the second inning there's a drop off, you might be a bullpen guy, or even just pitch repertoire. So if you're a 3 or 4 pitch in the zone guy, maybe you project as a starter. If you're a 2 pitch in the zone guy, maybe you project as a bullpen guy or a late reliever. But yeah, stature wise, I mean, baseball's great in that you can look a lot of different ways and be super successful, but our focus is more on pitchability, repertoire, that kind of thing.
What about velo? And when I ask this question, I'm talking about, is there a minimum velo as you're looking at, getting recommendation from guys or looking at lists on PBR or whatever? Is there a minimum velo to get you to come see me throw?
A lot of that is dependent on your age. So like if you're a 2024 guy this summer, like we're really looking mid 80s. Now, depending on the kind of guy you are, that could be like 84, that could be 86. Obviously, lefties have a little more leeway in the velo category. But yeah, I think
You a
like if you're,
lefty?
yeah, I was a
Well,
lefty
you
back
said
in.
you said you played first base too, so I thought, yeah, lefties are always kind of strange, right? No one wants to sit by them on the bus. No one wants to room with the lefty. You guys get the special. You get a little bit of all that movement, but that comes at a price.
Yeah, there's always something nice about being a lefty. We get to hang around a little more than maybe we should. But I've enjoyed my experience as a left-hander, so I'm not gonna bash it. But
I got you.
yeah, I think lefty righty makes a little bit of a difference. That's not to say you can be like a 75-mile-an-hour lefty at our level. Like you have to be in that low to mid 80s range for us to come look at you. Now, on the flip side of that, like as we get to 25s, 26s, like if you're a young guy that's 80, that's something that could jump off the page and say, okay, is this a guy we think can project and develop to a hard thrower? Yeah, I think like abstract answer is tough for this question, but depending on your age, it trickles down. I think if you're a mid 80s guy, that's something that's going to pique some interest.
So that's guys need to be thinking about, hey, by the time I get to that junior year, I've got to be mid 80s and above for this really to happen, right?
For the most part, I mean, there's always caveats where like if you're a guy that's got a really like if your slider or breaking ball differential is small, so let's say you throw like an 82 mile an hour fastball, but you're throwing a 78 mile an hour slider, like usually that'll show us that there's more velo behind that fastball. We just got to figure out how to get it out of you. So yeah, there's always caveats, but I think if you're a mid 80s guy, that doesn't mean stop working. Like obviously we want you to continue to throw harder and get stronger, but I think that's kind of where we're at from an evaluation standpoint.
What in your conference, what are you guys seeing just so people understand the difference between, hey, coming to see you in high school and then what you're seeing? What are your weekend guys normally, and what are you seeing out of the pen velo wise?
Yeah, I mean, we're super fortunate here. Our pitching staff has been super successful, and we got some guys with some good arms. So, like, you'll see your weekend starters will be upper eights to low nines, and then out of the bullpen, there's always, every team you face has a number of guys that's going to come out in the low 90s, really throwing the crap out of the ball. I think breaking ball velo is a big deal too. Guys figure out at this level how to throw that breaking ball a little bit harder, usually upper 70s. But yeah, I mean, fastball, breaking ball wise, like we're going upper 70s with the fastball is routine, and then mid to high eights, and then those front line weekend starters are going to get up into the low nines.
When you see guys, there's a lot more metrics out there, right? With PBR, guys have Rapsodo data and stuff like that. Is there anything that you guys key on, or are there some metrics that make some sense to you that, like, hey, this can translate?
So our biggest focus is the player's understanding of how to utilize his metrics. So like from a pitching perspective, if you're a high spin rate guy, we want to make sure that your approach to the game and your kind of game plan matches up with your metrics. So if you're that high spin rate guy, we want to see that you know to throw the fastball at the top of the zone, break off more of a curveball. If you're a low spin rate guy, you're pounding the bottom of the zone, you're breaking off changeups and sliders, that kind of thing. I think saying that I have a really high spin rate or maybe I have a really low spin rate, it's not necessarily positive or negative. It's just a matter of understanding what advantage that gives you on the pitcher's mound. So if you're advanced enough as a high school player to say, my spin rate numbers tell me I should approach the game this way, and you can execute that, then that's something that's going to jump off the page. We're not going to cross you off or highlight you just because of what your spin rate or your metrics numbers might be.
What about from the statistics standpoint? Are there statistics that, I mean, I know parents get a little excited about, like, the guy doing the game changer. Hey, you didn't get, that wasn't an earned run or whatever. Are there some stats that jump out, or that, like, when you're looking at a guy, oh, that catches my eye a little bit?
Yeah, so I do a daily sheet with our pitchers. Now, the three stats that I'll track are our ERA, our strikeout to walk ratio, and our whip. So ERA, like, whether or not there's a discrepancy if that was an earned run or not, the bottom line is, like, if we're not allowing runs, it's going to be super difficult to beat us. So I think overarchingly, like, my high school basketball coach used to say, old sayings are old because they're true. So like the ERA stat has been around so long, I just am under the impression there has to be some value to it. So that stat's always up there. The objective that I always put on our guys is, like, our hunt is going to be to cut that in half from the previous year. Obviously that's lofty in any setting under any circumstances, but, like, lofty goals motivate you. So our objective is going to be to cut that in half. I think if we're looking for a baseline, like a run every third inning. So like if you're a 3 ERA or below guy, I think that's something to strive for. Strikeout to walk is similar in that we want 3 times as many strikeouts as we have walks. If you're a guy that's sending out video and I haven't been able to see you pitch in a game, it's usually difficult for me to decipher your command. So if you can say, hey, I struck out 45 guys this summer and I only walked 15, that's a good number. And then whip, we're just looking at, like, how easy are you making your job? Like, how many walks, hits divided by innings pitched? Like, if you're going out there and you're throwing a ton of clean innings and nobody's getting on base, there's probably success for you going forward as a pitcher. And if your whip is high, like sneaky, you might be able to, like, whip is high, but ERA is low. Maybe you're a guy that can battle out of some tough situations. But I think if we can create relaxed pitches and low leverage pitches for ourselves, then we're going to be more successful as a rule.
So I'm going to ask this next question. I'm going to divide it into underclassmen and upperclassmen guys. So there's, and this debate's timely coming into the fall. For underclassmen guys, do you recommend guys play deep into the fall and pitch, or do you recommend guys hit the weight room, and how should they be making that decision?
I think it's on a really individual basis. Bottom line, like, weight room has to be a priority. Like, we need to continue to get bigger, faster, stronger. I am also a huge proponent of playing as much as you can. I know even with my guys, like, our big theme is, like, the Max Scherzer method. Like, pitchers that are the best throw the most. You get more familiar with your body. You get more familiar with how the ball feels in your hand. The big crux of that for us is, like, load management. Like, that doesn't mean we're going out and long tossing 300 feet or pitching 5 live innings every day. It means we understand, like, the guys in the big leagues are on a 5-day progression, and every 5th day that starter's throwing 100 pitches. So, like, there's a formula there that you can cater to yourself to find how to pitch late into the fall. Then again, like, maybe you're a guy that threw a ton of innings for your high school in the spring. You pitched every weekend in the summertime. That doesn't mean you should shut it down for the fall. It means maybe we worry about that load management. So I think if you're in a travel organization or a high school organization where you have good people around you and the coaches and the trainers and the strength coaches that you work with are pushing you in the right direction, like there's a method there where you can figure out how to play as many games, how to pitch as much as you can and stay healthy, and then continue to get bigger, faster, and stronger in the weight room all at the same time.
Do you have a ballpark for? I know guys like in the past, guys would completely shut down, not throw it off for a while. Now, my understanding from most guys are looking for like that 4 to 6 week window where they're not pitching competitively to kind of a deload period. Do you have a ballpark deload time frame that you think's valuable for high school guys?
Not necessarily. I know for myself, like individually, I can tell my story. Like when we'd get to like November 1st, I played basketball in high school. So like I would put my glove down and I would go play hoops until February. And then I'd pick the stuff back up again. I think if you're staying athletic and, you continue to do your work in the weight room, then we can be on a really good cadence to pick it back up in the springtime. There's also a ton of great throwing programs out there. I know I'll give my guys an off-season throwing program that they'll stick to. And again, I think the bottom line for a pitcher is it always comes down to the load management and what you're comfortable with. Like if you're worn out, there's not a problem with shutting down if that's what you need at that point. If you feel good, I think you should keep throwing. If you're a guy that needs to build up, I think that typical shutdown period can be super valuable build up time. So I think to tie the bow on how this connects to everything else is like, if you have really good communication with the people that are in your corner and you can say, hey, this is how I feel at this point in my progression, where should I go next? Can you give me some guidance? You can find a formula that fits you specifically, and we can continue to get better through that off season.
You mentioned development. You got a guy that comes in with a bag full of plyo balls, and another guy's got a connection ball from Texas Baseball Ranch, and then you've got someone with a core velocity belt. How do you merge all those when those guys show up in your program?
The first question I always ask is why. So like a guy sets up his Velo Pro or his core Velo belt, his connection ball, he's tossing plyos. I'll just go up and be like, what's your focus? What's your purpose? If the guy has an explanation for me, cool. Like it doesn't, outside of a few very minor things, there's really not a wrong answer. Because pitching is so individualized. The only thing I'd recommend from there, so long as that guy has a good answer to it and he's doing it for a purpose, not just saying, coach, I want to throw 100. Like we have to understand how the tool is going to help us get there. But in that regard, I think the more tools in the toolbox we have, the better. So the next thing I always promote is like, okay, you're the guy with the connection ball. You're the guy with the plyos. You're the guy with the core velo. You guys got to go talk to each other because maybe you see something as the core velo guy that this guy doing the plyos hasn't ever heard before, and that could help him. And then maybe, vice versa on down the line where each guy has a little bit different mentality about their purpose and their focus at practice. If we can get all three of them with each other's ideas, I think that's how we grow as a pitching staff instead of pigeonholing yourself as a core velo, a connection ball, a plyo guy.
So on being recruited yourself and then now on the other side as a coach, do you have any interesting recruiting stories that you can share publicly?
So the one that stood out to me from this summer, I had gotten a DM from a kid that I had never spoken to before. And he said, Coach, I have some interest in your school. I'd love to jump on a phone call. So we set it up. He had pitched that day. I called him after the game. How'd it go? Can I give you some information about our school? And he goes, well, did you come to the game? And I was like, no, I wasn't able to make it out, but thank you for sharing that video with me before our phone call. Let's get the ball rolling. Let's start communicating a little bit. He goes, well, I sent you that message because I wanted a number of schools to come watch me as like a last ditch thing because I'm going to commit to this other school tomorrow morning. So it was super interesting.
I'm glad I didn't waste my time, right?
Yeah, I mean, and listen, like from a certain perspective, I can understand where the kid was coming from, but also the community of coaches that recruit talent, throughout the summertime is small and is super connected. So like there, I would never do this personally, but I can see a guy who maybe had been on that kid throughout the summer calling up the school he committed to and saying, "Hey, I want to let you know, like he sent feelers out to a bunch of guys 12 hours before he called you and committed." So I think there's I'm sure the kid will be super successful, and I think he had all the right intentions in mind, but it was definitely interesting to see the comparison
Well, and
idea.
I don't know that parents and players understand that. The coaching network, you guys are working camps together, you're coaching summer league teams together, you're competing against guys with former head coaches, no other guy. I mean, it's a network. So don't think you're gonna say something to one coach and it's not, the other coaches aren't gonna find out. That's
Yeah, and I mean the good news, if we're gonna put a silver lining on this, it's that like there's been a number of conversations I've had personally throughout the summer where it's like, hey, we were on this guy and maybe he couldn't get in, or maybe he's looking for this major. I know
yeah.
you guys have that. Like maybe it's worth taking a look at him. So as much as it, in the context of my story, it could be detrimental. There's also a ton of value in the understanding of like these coaches all know each other and they all speak to each other throughout the
Yeah.
process.
Never burn a bridge because that guy could help you later on. Or listen, he could show up on your staff, right? Like guys
Right.
move around too. So
Yeah.
so there's a lot of options for guys. Guys are looking for schools trying to make that fit. Why Wagner?
Yeah, I love this question. For me, like being a Jersey guy, my whole life I had like an idea of what Staten Island looked like, and it wasn't necessarily the best one. But now getting a chance to be on campus here and be on the island every day, like you go down the hill, you have all the action that you're looking for. The best food in the world is here on Staten Island, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. You come up top of the hill if you want to hang out and you want a quiet day, or you need a slower pace. This is a place where you can do that. Facilities wise, we have a brand new locker room. Our practice field on campus just got redone. MLB grade infield, MLB grade outfield, MLB grade bullpens, brand new batting cages, pitching machines, the whole nine. We play our home games at the stadium, at the ballpark down here that we share with the Staten Island Ferry Hawks, newly renovated. We got brand new video board, brand new turf, outfield walls, bullpens, concourse, the whole thing. And not to mention, like right past the right center field wall is the New York City skyline. So whether it's from an athletic perspective with all the awesome stuff we have, I mean, you can see the uniforms and the gear. I think like that's a no-brainer. And then additionally, like academically speaking, the proximity to New York City, you have every opportunity in the world academically, from our theater program to our sciences to our business program. We're super fortunate that New York City is right there and provides these opportunities from a professional standpoint. And then we have alumni that we have amazing relationships with that are looking for people to get into the workforce, looking to pull guys from our team to give internships to in the summertime. So I think whether it's from an academic standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, from a future career and professional goal standpoint, like Wagner is an amazing spot to be.
Eric Reardon, pitching coach for the Seahawks there at Wagner College. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
Marty, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.